Okay, ladies and gents, let's get into our social studies essential question assessment number 1 video. That was a mouthful. The question that you're going to be answering here is, does human nature push us toward order or chaos? It sounds a little bit confusing, but don't worry. I think you'll be in good shape here in just a few minutes. So let's talk about this first. What is the difference between order and chaos? Well, chaos is, chaos. It is the lack of authority. It means basically there's no organization. We don't have anybody who's at the front telling us what we can and can't do. There's just a total lack of organization. On the other hand, we have order. Order means that we're very well organized. People know where they fit in. People have their role. They do their role. They don't try to step out of line. So what do you think it is in our world? Well, the reality is you can argue a lot of different things with this, and that's the beauty of a question like this, is that it's designed to allow you to pick your side. So don't feel like you have to get stuck in on one specific point. For this, you're going to be answering, does human nature push us toward order or chaos, in 3 different ways. First for Rome, second for the Middle Ages, and third for exploration. If you would like to change your opinion for different sections, that's completely fine. So theoretically, you could say order for Rome and exploration, and chaos for Middle Ages. It's whatever you would like. I'll leave that up to you here, this time through especially. We'll come back to this rubric in a few minutes because I think it'll make more sense after I've done a little bit more explaining. So, our question, does human nature push us toward order or chaos? So we have humans. Do they want order? Do they want chaos? Well, we have these 3 different criteria. Let's start with Rome. In Rome, what was it that they were favoring, let's say? Order or chaos? Well, here's how we might want to argue that it was order, and I'll give you both sides of it just as a little preview here. You're going to see both sides. I'm going to give you a little bit of starting points for both. So, order. When you look at Rome, Rome was around for many, 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 many years. If you look at it on this map, it actually has times listed in BC, which we would call BCE, in AD, which was what we would call CE, for Common Era. So we're talking about hundreds of years here in which Rome has this massive, massive empire. That in itself requires a whole lot of organization in order for them to be able to be successful for so long. And when you look at it, it seems like the people may have favored organization. First off, most of the people are living in large cities. They're not living out in rural farms away from all of the action. Why? Well, for a lot of different reasons. The cities provided a lot of different things for the people, between entertainment with the Colosseum and the Roman baths, to things that were essentials for their life. The aqueducts providing them with water. They had protection within the cities from the great Roman military. It was itself very well organized and, by the way, funded by tax money. In other words, people were paying the government for this. So keep in mind, people are paying the government. That in itself also kind of implies organization. The fact that they had a monetary system was really important too, and that really helped their economy to do well so that people could have businesses and succeed. And the government itself kept great track of the people because they had a census every 5 years. Those are a lot of reasons there are a lot of examples of things that you could potentially argue imply that the Roman Empire really, really favored organization and order over chaos. On the other hand, you might say it's chaos. The people loved to go to the Colosseum to watch these gladiatorial contests in which people would kill each other in very chaotic type of battles. So the fact that people enjoyed these battles, is that something that we should imply, meaning that they really liked the whole idea of chaos to an extent? There were so many civil wars, rebellions, and uprisings in Rome that tells us to an extent that maybe they didn't like all of the order. Maybe they were trying to push away from order and into a more chaotic state where they didn't have such authoritarian rule over them. Anytime you have civil war and uprising, that tells you that people aren't happy with the government and the control over them. In Rome, they had tons of this. Continuing on, there were so many assassinations in Rome of political leaders. Maybe even the leaders themselves weren't so into all of the order that they currently had. Maybe they didn't like the order. They were trying to change the order. And one of the ways this occurred was through assassinations. And overall, there was so much corruption where people weren't really following the rules. You know, if you were somebody who was wealthy, you would do whatever you wanted to do for yourself, potentially, whether it be through a government position or whatever else. And this corruption shows that not everybody wanted to follow the rules and follow the natural order of things and only do what they were told they could do. So maybe they preferred a little bit more of this chaos. Those are just some ideas to get you going here. You can pick your side. Now, when you pick your side, make sure that you explain it well, or else you won't get the full points associated with each of these criteria. So let's start off in this column with Rome, as I'm kind of scrolling my mouse across here, excuse me. So Rome, in order to get a 5 out of 5 on this section, you need to have multiple strong and accurate supporting details and a clear connection to the essential question. In other words, you need to make sure that you're answering this Roman perspective as it relates to us as humans pushing towards order or chaos. In order to get a 5 out of 5, you need to have what I'm going to call a 3 by 2. 3 main ideas with 2 supporting details for each main idea. In other words, you could say your first main idea for Rome is that people really favored really valued what the government provided to them. And to prove this, you could say, look, the government provided them with a lot of services within the city between protection and everything else. And they also provided them with, we could say, a lot of social events with the gladiators and with the Roman baths, let's say. So that could be that's one main idea, saying they appreciate what the government provided them with, and then 2 supporting details. My 2 supporting details, again, were the entertainment and then also the protection. That's 1 by 2. You would need to have 3 separate main ideas with strong support. That's to get a 5 out of 5. To get a 4 out of 5, you could have 3 main ideas with 1 strong supporting detail for each, or you could have 2 main ideas with 2 supporting details for each. A little bit less, but it still is okay as long as you're connected in. If you drop down to a 3 out of 5, this means that you don't have a clear connection to the essential question. You maybe have a lot of great information about Rome, but you have a disconnect and you're not really answering the whole human nature things. This is something that happens very often when students will just kind of ramble about a topic, but they don't really stay on focus with what they're supposed to with the question. If you do that, it's a 3 out of 5. Finally, a 0 would be insufficient details. In other words, let's just make it simple. You're going to have to redo it because you don't have enough information. So make sure that you have enough information so that you can earn yourself points here. And again, you will have to redo it. It's not really a 0, it's a redo because there are no zeros on these type of tests. Okay? And by the way, you can redo this if you, any part of this, even if you got a 4 out of 5 and you want to get a 5, you're allowed to do that. Next, let's talk about the Middle Ages here just for a minute or two. Middle Ages, did it seem like these people were favoring order or chaos? Well, let's talk about this. The fact that they have this social system, this feudalism during the Middle Ages, kind of implies order. And by the way, this is our order section here first. Because it's so well structured. Everybody has their place in society, and you can't really move and change. And everybody has a role, a job, and you do that job. And it lasted for a really, really, really long time, by the way, too, which kind of implies that people maybe did like this order because it lasted for so long. Not only was it order within your social structure, but also within your church and within your religious beliefs. The Pope had so much power, could tell people what to do. And when the Pope said, hey, you need to go to war, the king told his lords that they had to send their people to war. So it's just this total pecking order where everybody has their role, everybody does their job. And people don't really question it very much. That in itself is a lot of order. And really that's why they call it the Dark Ages, because there's not a lot of learning and there's not even a lot of records from this time period because people weren't so concerned with records and history and learning. It was more concerned with just, let's make sure we do our job. Let's make sure we keep everything going the way that it is going so that everybody can stay in power who's in power and everybody who's not in power can at least survive. Interesting perspective, but nonetheless, that would imply that people favored order because if they didn't, well, they probably would have tried to get out of it a little bit more quickly, right? Because, it wasn't ideal. On the other hand, you could argue that those people were really just stuck, and really they really wanted more chaos than existed. And you could argue this pretty strongly by pointing out the fact that after Gutenberg invented his printing press, there was so much change that occurred in Europe very, very, very quickly. We have our Italian Renaissance ninja painters. You didn't know that, come on, you had to. If the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Raphael, Donatello, Leonardo, and Michelangelo, they're named after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, yeah. Or, excuse me, out of the Renaissance artists and such. But nonetheless, we had this rebirth of art and of learning and of all of these really valuable, appreciated things that we have in our modern society. They didn't have during the Dark Ages. Well, that all ends with Gutenberg. So it wasn't, in the argument here that I'm kind of supporting, is that maybe it wasn't so much about the fact that people didn't want it, it was just that people didn't have access to learning and access to the opportunity to express themselves through art. Also, during this time period and right afterwards, again, we see a massive change in the way that the church's power is, and it really falls apart quite a bit with the Protestant Reformation. If you want to look more into this, look up the Protestant Reformation or Martin Luther. And you'll see a lot about how the church changes and loses a lot of power. And one of the big things they're trying to change it from is from the Pope having all the power, because I don't like that authority figure, right? That kind of implies chaos. And you could even argue, too, that the Crusaders who we talked about, they were just doing their job because they were told to by the Pope. You could say really the motivation wasn't so much just the Pope, but it was also the fact that they wanted freedom. They wanted to be able to leave their own homes and go and live on their own a little bit and be able to experience new things in life. And that implies a little bit more chaos than order like they were experiencing on their manors. So, again, same exact criteria, 3 by 2 for a 5 out of 5, 3 by 1 or 2 by 2 for a 4 out of 5, and a 3 would be having a total disconnect from that whole human nature pushing us towards order or chaos. Make sure you answer that directly. I want to really emphasize that so there's no confusion. And again, if you get a 0, you have to redo it. It's not really a 0, it's just a redo. Finally, lastly, we have our age of exploration. Did it seem like our sailors and our people involved in this age of exploration, did they really push us more towards order or chaos? Well, let's talk about some of the specifics. First off, with order. You could say, look, they explored everywhere in the world. They're just trying to find everything that we have and try to make order of this land that we don't really know anything about. Because to be quite honest with you, one of the big things they wanted to do was create a world map. When you look at Magellan in the red line that's going across by the equator on both sides of the map, I mean, it was 3 years that this voyage is gone, and Magellan and the majority of his crew actually dies along the way. And they do it for what purpose? Just so they can get all the way across the globe and so they can make a map so that everybody knows what really does exist. I mean, that's a pretty crazy risk to take there just so that we can know what exists in the world. But there's our primitive map that was made as a result. You could also argue this crazy thing about this papal line of demarcation. At least it seems crazy to me, so maybe I shouldn't judge. But the fact that the Pope actually said in 1493, everywhere west of this land belongs to Spain, and everywhere east of it that is unclaimed belongs to Portugal. The fact that they're actually trying to divide the world in half just to make it more organized. It seems like a real reach, and it doesn't really make sense logically, but that's really how far these people were going to keep organized. Now, on the other side, you could say it was chaos. I mean, people were willing to go so far to break away from what they currently were doing. They wanted this freedom. They wanted chaos. They just wanted to be able to do their own thing. Because when you look at these maps, I don't know if you're noticing this in the upper right-hand portion of the map, that's a sea monster. They actually had sea monsters drawn onto their maps because they were legitimately afraid of these sea monsters. Yet, you have these people who are still going out and serving on these voyages. And you're going to say, oh yeah, well, Christopher Columbus and Ferdinand Magellan, they could make lots and lots and lots of money, and we remember their names, don't we? Well, I'd hate to break it to you, but Columbus's voyages had over 80 people on it, his first voyage, that is. So you can tell that it wasn't just Columbus, and I don't think many of us remember anybody else on that voyage, do you? I didn't think so. So, when you look at it overall, there were so many risks, whether it be with pirates, whether it be with lack of food, battling amongst the people on their own ship, and even also with the native indigenous populations where they landed everywhere else. And the fact that they're doing this all with such minimal technology, I mean, this takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of desire to break the mold from what you're currently doing. I mean, people were willing to break out of their own way of life to go and do this. Why? Maybe it's because people like this chaos. They like the adventure. They like all of the new, risky danger associated with it. They don't necessarily like that whole stay at home and just do my own thing. So, as you can see, we have both sides that we could argue here. Again, the exact same criteria here. Make sure that we are connected to human nature pushing us toward order or chaos. And if you don't do it well, redos will be coming your way. Now, I'd like to think that I gave you a pretty good framework here to build the house. It's up to you now to get the materials. You need to get your notes out. You need to take some notes, organize it, see where you're kind of lacking. If you go and you start taking down some notes and you say, you know what, I have one good idea for the second section, but I need 2 more, then you know what? You need to go research a little bit. You can check folders that I've put on Blended Schools, or if you want to research on your own a little bit, research on your own a little bit. Find some new stuff. I gave some ideas about the Renaissance and about the Protestant Reformation. If you want to look that stuff up, go do it. That's awesome. I would love it if you were creative and found your own stuff. But nonetheless, it's up to you, though, to take the framework, build on it, and make something great out of it. So I'm hoping to see something beautiful like this from your papers when we're all said and done. Okay, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me, but just make sure you put in some time. Think about this really clearly ahead of time so that you have a really solid essay to work with here. Okay, good luck, and make sure again to email me or to ask me in person if you have any questions.